Let's talk about my favorite genre, fantasy romance. Hey guys, I'm Marilyn and welcome back to my channel. So, as you can see from the title of today's video, we're going to be talking about writing fantasy romance. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I absolutely love fantasy romance. It is my favorite genre, it is most of what I read, and it is also what I am currently writing. So, for this video, I'm talking about real fantasy romance, or romantasy as it's now called. Not just fantasy with romantic subplots. But if you do want to read a great standalone fantasy novel with pretty substantial romantic subplots, check out my fantasy adventure novel, To Wear a Crown. The Universal book link is in the description box below. It's available all online retailers. You can request it from your library, request it from your local bookstore, whatever floats your boat. So now, without further ado, let's get into my 5 tips for writing fantasy romance. So, first things first, blend fantasy and romance seamlessly. That's definitely easier said than done, but let's get into it. If you're writing fantasy romance, you are writing a book that is both. That means that if you were to take out the fantasy elements, the romance would be able to stand on its own as a romance book. And if you take out the romance elements, the fantasy would be able to stand on its own as a fantasy book. So you need to integrate those magical, fantastical elements seamlessly with the romantic plot, and both need to be substantial and sort of meaty enough to stand on their own. And then let the two play off each other. So not just you have a fantasy plot, you have a romance plot, and those two are happening simultaneously, but let them actually influence and improve each other. So use the fantasy elements to create more romantic tension and provide opportunities for character development. So whether there's a curse or supernatural powers or some kind of quest that requires them to work together, use the fantasy elements, the world, but also the fantasy plot to make the romance work. And if you can, use the romance to influence the fantasy plot. The balance of these two and having both in your story, having them integrated well and giving enough attention to each is the key to writing romantasy. Then tip number 2, world building with romance in mind. Develop a rich and immersive fantasy world that serves as the backdrop for your romance. Consider how the magical elements, the unique cultures, and fantastical creatures can enhance the romantic narrative. The world should not only be visually captivating and sort of create that romantic mood, but it should also contribute to the challenges and dynamics of the romantic relationship. Tip number 3, create compelling characters. So you need to build well-rounded and relatable, intriguing characters, because that is what truly holds a romance alive. That's, I think, what holds any book alive, but especially a romance, which is so focused on characters together. Both your protagonist, your love interest, and your side characters should have fleshed out personalities and goals and arcs. And if you can incorporate elements of fantasy into the characters and into their identities, like magical abilities or them being from a unique race, and explore how these aspects will then influence a relationship. It is so interesting, and I think that's one of the things that makes fantasy romance so interesting, is how being in that world and having these aspects that we don't have in the normal world influence the characters and then in turn influences their relationships. Tip number 4, explore themes beyond romance. Use the fantasy setting and the fantasy plot to explore broader themes that go beyond just the romance. Themes like destiny, sacrifice, power, the abuse of power, and the consequences of the use of magic or the possession of magic can add a lot of depth to your story, and that'll once again make the fantasy element be able to stand on its own as well. Tip number 5, build tension and anticipation. You need to develop a compelling romantic arc for your story by building tension and anticipation throughout the novel. This is so important with any form of romance writing, is the build-up. Introduce obstacles that challenge the characters individually, maybe in terms of the fantasy plot, in terms of character development, but then also challenges them as a couple and challenges the relationship between them. Use fantasy elements to create unique conflict and challenges that'll keep the readers invested in the fate of these characters and the outcome of the romance. And then a little bonus tip, be innovative with your fantasy elements. While there may be common tropes in fantasy, in romance, in romantasy itself, find ways to put your own unique twist on these tropes or to subvert them. Surprise your readers, but with unexpected magical elements and fresh takes on classic fantasy and romantic themes. So remember, the key to writing fantasy romance is the seamless integration of fantasy or magical elements with a well-developed and emotionally resonant romantic plot. Take the time to establish a captivating world, captivating plot lines, and characters that readers will want to invest in emotionally. So yeah, that's it. Those are my 6 tips for writing great fantasy romance. If you found this video useful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any tips of your own for writing romantasy, leave them in the comments below. Remember to hit that subscribe button and ring that little bell so you don't miss any videos. I post writing advice videos like this one on Wednesdays and book reviews on occasional Fridays. As always, you can find me on my website, Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, TikTok, X, BookBub, and my newsletter. All the links are in the description box below. And then I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!